Today, I want to talk about who gets to decide what your name is and why. I'd like you to just think for a moment of the name, and I mean the precise words that are printed on your birth certificate or your passport, right? And now I'd like you to think about the name or the names that you use on social media to identify yourself to the world. Are they the same? Do you have one singular name that you go under in all different circumstances and that you'll use from cradle to grave? If not, if you use different names for different contexts, are you being somehow disingenuous, insincere, even dishonest? Today I'm going to offer up the idea that your name acts as a uniquely sensitive pressure point in big debates, big important debates about liberty and security. Debates that stretch back for centuries and would have been easily recognized by this guy, Jeremy Bentham. Jeremy Bentham was one of the foremost intellectuals living in late 18th century Britain, and he spent much of his life thinking about the balance between liberty and security and devising proposals as to how that balance might be better adjusted. You might, for example, have heard of Bentham's panopticon, pictured there, which was a kind of prison in which the behavior of inmates would be controlled by the constant fear that they were being watched. Now, the panopticon is still famous today and is frequently invoked in debates about government surveillance and civil liberties. But Bentham also wrote another proposal, one that has languished in obscurity for centuries and was in some ways even more radical. He proposed a universal tattoo. In the early 1780s, Bentham was deeply concerned about the high crime rate and the low conviction rate. The problem, he thought, was this: to punish a man in almost any way whatever, you must know who he is. You must know not only that such and such an offence has been committed, but that it was such a one who committed it. But in an era before the invention of photography, it was actually pretty difficult to identify the perpetrator of a crime, even if there were witnesses. Witnesses' descriptions could be vague or inaccurate, or even if they were accurate, it would be quite easy for the perpetrator of a crime to disguise themselves afterwards. It was, in short, Bentham thought, too easy to hide. Bentham's Eureka moment came one day when he was speaking with an old friend of his, a sailor. He happened to glance down at his friend's bare arm, and he saw something that he had never seen before. It consisted, he wrote, of his name at length, exhibited in characters of a deep blue. It had been imprinted in his childhood, and he was then verging to old age. What Bentham was looking at, and what he's describing there, is, of course, a tattoo. As you can probably tell from the way that he takes care to describe the sight to his reader, tattoos were a relatively rare phenomenon in 18th century Britain. Sailors who learned the art abroad and practiced it on their own bodies were a fascinating sight. And scientists and collectors even purchased or took for free the body parts of the tattooed dead so that they could more easily study and exhibit the phenomenon. And these tattoos here, you can't see them incredibly clearly, but there's a name up here and some crude drawings, are an incredibly rare example of exactly the kind of thing that Bentham might have been looking at as he gazed on the arm of his friend. These are printed and preserved on a piece of human flesh and kept in the Hunterian Museum in Glasgow. Anyway, as Bentham looked at this site, a thought occurred to him. The idea struck me, and why, said I to myself, should not the practice be universal? What stronger preservative could there be for purity of morals and obedience to the laws? The solution to these problems of the high crime rate and the low conviction rate Bentham thought, was to allocate every single person in England a unique name, and then to tattoo it on them in a highly visible place. And realistically, what he must have been talking about is somewhere on your face. An assailant, a thief, or a rapist would find it hard to avoid having their unique name seen by their victim or by witnesses, and so this would deter them from committing the crime in the first place. It would also reduce the need for imprisonment before trial, because again, it would be pretty hard to flee the law without having your name seen, noted, and reported. In other words, in modern terms, it would work like a kind of cross between an ID card and a probation tag. Now, Bentham suspected that his proposal might not be entirely popular, but he suggested trying it out anyway. He said that those who have nothing to hide have nothing to lose, an argument, of course, that we're still used to hearing today in debates about government surveillance. But Bentham never published his proposal. We don't know why. Perhaps he thought better of it. Maybe he even had an inkling of the sinister uses to which this kind of technology could be put. Because, of course, over 150 years after he wrote his proposal, compulsory tattoos were used in Nazi concentration camps, contributing towards some of the worst atrocities of the 20th century. Voluntary tattoos have never been more popular than they are today, but the idea of tattooing somebody against their will remains politically toxic. But the urge to tackle social problems by marking out individuals remains as strong as ever in the 21st century. Over recent years, some politicians have said that we can cut crime by making people carry ID cards, that fingerprinting people would eliminate fraud, or that retina scanning would mean an end to terrorist atrocities. But opponents of these initiatives say that we are witnessing a slow creep towards the death of our civil liberties. They say we're being offered a trade-off between liberty and security, and that those who would sacrifice liberty for security deserve neither. One respect in which things have changed quite a lot since Bentham's day is the role that huge, private, powerful corporations play in our everyday lives. And it's to one of these that I now want to turn. Can I just ask how many people in here are on Facebook? Stick your hands up. Yeah, okay, that's quite a lot. And of those people, how many of you use on Facebook the exact same name that is printed on your passport or birth certificate? People are a bit uncertain. Does anyone not? Okay, yep, we've got quite a few there, and I count myself among them. I use my middle name, not my surname, on Facebook. And this is because I want to maintain some kind of a distinction between my public professional and my private personal life. When I post photos or updates that are meant for my friends and family, I don't necessarily want them to be found with a Google search. You could say that I don't wish to be identified. Well, in September 2014, Facebook carried out a crackdown on exactly this sort of fake self-naming among its 1.5 billion strong community of users. Certain members found themselves locked out of their accounts with the following message: your account has been temporarily suspended because it looks like you're not using your real name. Facebook is a community where people use their real identities. We require everyone to provide their full name so you always know who you're connecting with. In making this statement, in carrying out this crackdown, Facebook was merely implementing the view of its founder, Mark Zuckerberg. In a 2010 interview with journalist David Kirkpatrick, Zuckerberg said, "You have one identity. The days of you having a different image for your work friends or co-workers, and for the other people you know, are probably coming to an end pretty quickly. Having two identities for yourself is an example of a lack of integrity." So Zuckerberg thinks that Facebook users have or should have just one identity, and that is the one codified through the name printed on your state-issued ID. What was a minor irritation for some, being locked out of their Facebook account, that is, meant far more to others. The crackdown was swiftly followed by an effectively organised international protest led by members of the drag queen community, many of whom had been booted off Facebook for using their stage names. The protesters' arguments were summed up succinctly by the San Francisco politician David Campos, who said, "The ability to self-identify is a matter of health and safety. Not allowing drag performers, transgender people, and other members of our community to go by their chosen names can result in violence, stalking, violations of privacy, and repercussions at work." So Campos sees in allowing people liberty to use the names that they choose on Facebook, the ability for marginalised communities to escape forms of oppression and harassment. So this has dragged on for some months now. Transgender users of Facebook, Native American users of Facebook, and many others have all added their voices to the protest and said, Facebook is not allowing me to use my real name. And just last week, actually, Facebook issued a statement saying that they were going to allow people to make small changes in order to more easily use a name that is not the one printed on their state-issued ID. Effectively, they're allowing people to plead their case for a new name. But they have not abandoned the one identity policy. Facebook's VP for Growth, Alex Schultz, said on Friday, "When people use the name others know them by, they are more accountable for what they say, making it more difficult to hide behind an anonymous name, to harass, bully, spam, or scam someone else." So in Alex Schultz's view, it's acceptable to ask people to sacrifice the liberty of naming themselves how they want in order to ensure enhanced security for others. Perhaps these concessions will appease the protesters, and this will be the end of the matter. Or perhaps they won't go far enough, and a new front will open up in this particular battle. In either case, in the rhetoric used by both campaigners and corporation, we can recognise traces of that age-old debate about liberty and security. Jeremy Bentham's proposal should remind us that the terms of that debate don't change as much as they simply adapt to new technologies, whether this may be tattooing, social media, or the next thing around the corner. When we see legislation going forward that proposes new ways of marking out the individual, or when we see giant corporations taking over this function from nation-states, it might be interesting to ask ourselves, would we be up for Jeremy Bentham's universal tattoo? And if not, what exactly is the difference? Thank you.